Hello. Today we're going to talk about the importance of context in gamification. So the idea behind gamification is that you can take elements of games, such as achievements, badges, levels, that sort of thing, and apply it to other contexts in order to engage users and solve real-world problems. So it's being used in science and education. It's a relatively new area, but the current research primarily focuses on engaging the end user and making the activity fun. While these are highly important areas, we feel that a third area is missing right now, and that is the investigation of the context of deployment. So this talk is going to take a detailed look at the development process of an EduFitment gamification system. It will illustrate the importance of context in gamification design, and then we'll give key lessons for applying context in the design of other gamification systems. Gartner predicts that 80% of gamified apps are going to fail, and that's primarily due to bad game design. So while this is a very bold claim, I personally like the claim because it starts people talking about why is gamification failing? Why are we not actually succeeding with everything on gamification? And the remaining apps that are going to succeed, it's very clear that these are going to be due to identifying the business objectives and provide a thorough analysis of how gamification meets these objectives. I'm going to be discussing the importance of context through the EduFitment system. So EduFitment is a combination of education, fitness, and entertainment. And it was a gamification framework for educating children in nutrition and fitness. On the right, you can see the food group matchup game, which was a game leveraged for the system, and it was developed to teach what foods belong to what food groups. I was a part of a group of computer scientists who were approached by a multidisciplinary team of experts in nutrition, education, statistics, psychology, kinesiology. And we developed the EduFitment system using an iterative design process. We met weekly for brainstorming sessions where group members were assigned contextual tasks, such as what are the makeup of the schools, and what type of nutrition information should we provide to children. The members would report their findings and highlight any issues that we found, and then we would tackle these issues as a group. Once the issues were tackled, we would assign new tasks. So I'd like to say that the beginning EduFitment design is completely different from where we ended up, and that's entirely due to context. We started with the idea that we would create this single monolithic game that was focused on nutrition and fitness education, which would be a standalone PC application. It would be hosted in school classrooms, computer labs, and available in English only at launch. We found these important elements of context important to our design of EduFitment. The stakeholders, hosting organizations, target audience, diverse population, and post-deployment concerns are going to be discussed now. So stakeholders may bring critical requirements. Through our investigations, very early on, the stakeholders and nutrition experts decided that the plan they wanted to use was We Can. Now, We Can has national support. It's a part of Lady Obama's Let's Move program, and it had proven effectiveness for our target audience. But We Can has only 3 policies: eat right, get active, reduce screen time. Now, 2 of those 3 can be easily met using a game. But the problem where we conflicted with our expert was that reducing screen time can't really easily be done with a game. We felt, as computer scientists, that it could be active screen time, so they're actively learning, using a screen, but they're not passively just watching television, so this could be an exception to the rule. But the stakeholders felt otherwise, and had we not compromised, our system could have just died right there. So it was highly important to foster collaborative environment, and this required an entire rethink of the structure of EduFitment. No longer were we going to create this single monolithic game, but we now needed short, focused games that taught very specific educational methods that were not these long things where we couldn't just have like very long screen times. As our investigations continued, we started to look into the hosting organization. As I said, it was originally targeted for school classrooms and computer labs. This would ensure a large degree of participation and was also a convenient place to use this system. But when we approached the administrators, they really wanted us to have a fully evaluated tool before we were going to budget our system into the busy class schedule. So they were hesitant in using our system. That meant we needed to seek other venues. So we identified 2 free school-based civic centers that were already popular with students and provided many services, including an on-staff nurse. But we needed to investigate that as well, and the Civic Center didn't actually work out as well as we would hope. So our idea was that we needed to affect diet change. We taught nutrition, somehow they needed to actually take that knowledge and affect their diet. But the Civic Centers provided food that was unhealthy to children. So this was contrary to our intervention. And children have limited agency of change in the first place. Elementary school children don't typically make their own food. And we discovered through our investigations that our target population eat most of their calories at the schools and the civic centers, and that 94% of our target population were eligible for free or reduced lunches, which means they couldn't simply pick or choose what they were going to eat at lunch. They had this specific stuff that they had to eat. So we couldn't affect diet change at the schools. We couldn't affect diet change at the civic centers. That meant that we really needed to focus at the home. So we wanted to investigate the home environment as well. So we found it important to reach the children's families because the families cook the meals for the children. What we wanted to happen was the parents and guardians play alongside their children, and then they learn what foods are good to cook for their children, and then they would go on to cook food for the children learn the education and affects diet change. But this meant that our system had to evolve. No longer could it be just a standard PC app. We needed a central hosted online deployment so that it could be available in multiple locations, not just accessible at the home, but also at the civic centers and hopefully eventually schools. But investigations into the home environment, we actually realized that we have a very diverse population. For instance, 72% of our target population were of Hispanic ethnicity. And that meant that in the targeted area, over a third of Caucasian children, grades K through 10, are classified as obese or overweight, but that number almost raises to 1 in 2 for Hispanic children, which suggests there are major diet differences between cultures. So our idea was that we wanted to be culturally sensitive to these diet differences and have foods that were familiar to the parents. So they wouldn't be shown foods that were completely different from what they normally cook, but healthier versions of what they're used to. And so we developed an expandable database of foods that were shared between the games in order to solve that problem. Further investigations to the home, we realized that language barriers also exist in the home. So nearly 40% of children ages 5 and up speak or hear a language other than English in our targeted area. So that meant we needed to prioritize localization, multilingual capabilities early. We needed to make it available so that we would completely reach our target audience. So we developed 4 different languages, English, Spanish, French, and German, and we provided a flexible mechanism to add additional languages. Finally, after we had investigated the stakeholder requirements, the hosting organization requirements, the target addressed the fact that the target population couldn't affect their own diet change, and also looked at the multilingual capabilities of the children, the diversity of the children. We needed to turn to post-deployment concerns because our computer science group wasn't going to be around forever, but the nutrition experts were going to run this intervention. We were expected to develop the framework and be gone afterwards. So this intervention was going to continue longer than they had IT support for. So we would need to actually champion a role of stakeholder to administer the system. So this could be actually one of our other stakeholders. This could be one of the parents. If we got into the schools, then this could have been a teacher. But we needed to make that really simple because this wasn't going to be an expert using the system. This was going to be your average Joe, just not that knowledgeable on computer technical stuff. So we needed to make simple and powerful tools for this role. I want to show the final design, which was a web-based gamification framework, which had point systems, leaderboards, dashboards, other sort of gamification elements. It was fully featured, had easy-to-use administrative tools, had privacy-informed roles. It was flexibly multilingual. It had a plug-in game API for expansion to third-party games. It had a chat room for connecting users within the system. It contained 4 short nutrition games that were focused on specific education messages, as well as a proof of concept extra game, and an activity logging application for any exercise performed outside the system. Where we stand right now with the system is that the gamification system is ready for deployment. The games need further testing and refinement before they're ready. But what I wanted to say is that the end result is completely different from where we began, and that's entirely due to these contextual investigations. And to remind you, this is the stakeholder requirements, the hosting organization requirements, the fact that the target audience didn't necessarily have the agency of change that we wanted, the diversity of the population, and addressing post-deployment concerns. So we want to go through some lessons to get better gamification systems. And I'm going to go through most of these, but I'm not going to read it right now. So design should be interdisciplinary and participatory. This is a long-taught HCI principle. It's nothing new, but we feel that it's not being widely applied in the gamification area. We, in particular, found that there are many stakeholders that have key input into the design of the system. End users are required for making entertaining games. Domain experts are required for determining what content is best for the intervention. Representatives of the deployment environments obviously had their own concerns. Experts with an understanding of the target user group was required to capture that diversity. And champions are needed whenever your intervention is going to last longer than you have IT support for. You should align with the objectives and constraints of the hosting organization. So for us, we had hosting organizations that did not meet the requirements of the intervention. Schools didn't want us in first because we didn't have a tool that was proven to work. So they put a high bar of demonstrated efficacy, and they didn't really have time to fit us into their busy school schedule. Civic centers served food that conflicted with the intervention, and not only that, but further investigations showed that children weren't accompanied by parents, which meant that we couldn't provide them that stealth education at the civic centers. So the key lesson there is to thoroughly research the hosting organization constraints and to seek additional venues when that conflicts. You should understand and work with the limitations of the target population. So our target population had limited ability to affect diet change, which was our #1 goal. Other targets with restricted agency, you can think of members of the military or prison inmates have restricted agency as well. So you should ensure that the target agency is capable of affecting the desired change if behavior change is your goal. And if they cannot affect the desired change, you really need to identify who can. We feel it's important to be sensitive to cultural differences within the target population. So culture can influence your likes, dislikes, your frame of reference, and therefore influence the engagement with the gamification system. Our population in particular, the diets differ significantly, and significant numbers use languages other than English at home. So the key lesson there is to understand the cultural makeup of the target population and be sensitive and inclusive in design. And you should identify and address post-deployment concerns early in your investigations, not post-coding. So our system required a champion to take on the role of administrator, and it's important to consider who will maintain the system post-deployment. You may have an intervention that lasts longer than you have researchers to administer. I'll just reiterate these one more time. So design should be interdisciplinary and participatory. You should foster positive collaborative efforts, align with the objectives and constraints of the hosting organization, understand and work with the limitations of target population, be sensitive to cultural differences within the target population, and identify and address post-deployment concerns early. I'm going to leave you with this takeaway, and I hope if you take away anything from this talk, it's that gamification shouldn't start by randomly adding points to activities. It should start with a thorough investigation of how to best engage the end user, how to make the activity fun, and finally, the context of deployment. Thank you.